me dance in your love. I wanna feel your fire, baby, let me dance in your love. I wanna feel your fire, baby, let me dance in your love. I wanna feel your fire, rising from the flames, dies only to burn again. Let me dance in the rhythm of your flame. If I burn, let me die to burn again. If I burn, let me die to burn again.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Get Lit. And I am Blue Star Dear Woman, and my co-host is Rebecca Hahn. And as we mentioned, what was that, Becca?
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Get Lit.
There you go. There you go. And because I'm in transition, I have another new environment. I'm at the local natural food store in Eureka Springs, and Becca is located now in Michigan. So we're happy to be here again. And I'd like to introduce what's going on and open up this conversation and remind you, for any listeners that are inspired, you are always welcome to call in and join this conversation. And I know that's, it's kind of, at first you're a little timid, but don't worry about it. And when you call in, we just get your audio, so you won't be on video. So each week when we approach Get Lit, for me, I ask myself, what am I thinking about, or what am I doing personally? And that's how I'm prompt to bring the conversation or topic forward. And for those of you who have been watching the news on CCN, and mostly I get my news from Dee and Lisa and Mel V, is that we've come to a place where, once again, our efforts and our hopes and our beliefs have been challenged, just as all of us have experienced throughout life. You're on a flow, and then the ebb happens, and it feels like some of the things that are obstructing us are getting, once again, closer and closer to home. And so when I was tuning into the news and recognizing that, once again, we have to be very concerned and very discerning about where we get our information and who we're discussing it with, the only place I find that I can turn to is me. And so what I'm bringing forth today, what Rebecca and I like to discuss, is as things in your life get very challenging, what are some of the significant questions that you can ask yourself to just kind of gauge, are you on a good centering path? Are you finding a healthy way to embrace the happenings in the world? And interestingly enough, as this past 2 weeks have occurred for me, about every 10 years I go back to scriptures and Bibles and Kabbalah, and right now I just picked up the Bhagavad Gita, knowing now that there are breadcrumbs in each of these literatures. And as we read them, it's only what's true to you, what resonates to you, that's going to spark a truth. And so what I'm finding is I'm hearing and being called to further cultivate the understanding of the material reality and the versus the understanding of our immortality. And so that's kind of where we're going to take off from. Rebecca, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, in our discussion, you mentioned about, the theme of emotional immaturity and emotional management. And I think that really ties in because I think that, that really leads us to a place of, you know, coming, as you said, coming back to reading these ancient texts, you know, every decade or so with a new level of maturity, spiritually, emotionally, and a new management in place, then the perception of what that text is changes as well, and hopefully deepens. But, you know, again, I'm always so shocked at the level. I mean, you know, 2 broadcasts ago, I was saying, oh my gosh, the world's changing and it's amazing what I'm seeing out there. And, you know, 2 weeks later, I'm going, oh my God, people just don't get it. You know, like people's reactions, and, you know, it's such a dichotomy being here, because it's a great small city. It's beautiful. It's got 2 amazing colleges, you know, but I look around and I'm, you know, I look at your background and I see all this lush green and, you know, and it is that way here too in some ways, but, you know, there's a level of buying in that happens in places unlike Eureka that is normalcy, you know, and people, it's the old normal, but people are still functioning in that paradigm, wondering why we have this low level of apathy or depression or mismanagement systems in place, and we're just getting through the day. And, you know, we look and feel fine according to what we think is fine. But then when we break out of that and we have a new level of evolution or maturity or a new management system that gets put into place, all of that stuff is so apparent. And, you know, I hear myself talk to my partner or to just people in my life that aren't necessarily us, you know, because, you know, you're like the only one I talk to in Eureka. Cohort of people, and, you know, and then, you know, I travel for spiritual things. So those people are very inclined to understand my complexity and my language and my management system that I speak of. And then, you know, I get around other people and I'm like, wow, you really, like, you cannot even, your brain hurts listening to me. You have never experienced this. Like, everything in you becomes disoriented by what I'm saying. You haven't even experienced this yet. So again, we go back to that feeling of isolation and being really alone in this process. But I'm really curious, again, speaking to what you said, you can type in or call in, you won't be on video, but I'm really curious about what are some of the management systems that you've put into place with this evolutionary leap, and what systems are no longer working. I know that Blue mentioned earlier in our discussion before we got on air, you know, is breathing and meditation enough anymore? Or is it just a moment of that? Because I do believe we still need to do that. Is it just a moment? Is it no longer the practice, but is it the precursor, the intro to just a couple of minutes to a really deeper practice we haven't discovered yet, or we're just discovering? So,
and then I think good questions to ask, no matter what practice that you have, whether it's conscious breathing or doing Tai Chi, whatever it is, how do you assess your progress? Because, you know, we go into our quiet space to center, to clear and get clean. But the real test is when we go back into the social environment, back out into the world.
Right.
And you know, do you have good questions to ask yourself? Like, are you noticing that this one person in your life who, you know, after about 15 minutes of conversation, you get frustrated, okay? Now, have you noticed that this same person, after 15 minutes, you're no longer getting frustrated, and you're still attentive and you're still in a compassionate place, but something has changed? And I think now it's important to have a way to give feedback to yourself. How well is your centering helping you?
Yeah.
Yes, the 2 themes. It's, to me, I like the categories of emotional mastery and spiritual maturity. And I think, once again, we've got to step away and understand that all the religions and New Age spirituality has really enhanced an esoteric theoretical understanding. It hasn't, when it comes to the compassion and consciousness of our own being, that's a very individual choice. No external organization is going to provide that.
No.
But I think, unfortunately, because our religions have been programmed, they've really just made us very mental. And I think that it's very easy to think because you have a good esoteric mental understanding of, religious, spiritual uh, um, doctrines, that we assume we are progressing. We assume that we're mature. And
Right.
that's not so.
How do we internalize that in a way?
Right. How do we internalize that? And I think that's where you have to break it down and watch yourself when you're in the world. The other thing is like what you spoke to, Becca, being isolated. I'm beginning to recognize that those of us who are evolving, and we know we're evolving, we know things are shifting. I think an inevitable part of our self-growth is that we begin to choose less and less participation in the world. And at first, you can go through all kinds of self-criticism about that. You can think, oh, I've lost my my patience, I've lost my spark. But in truth, I think what's happening is we're really starting to recognize things in the material world that are no longer serving us. And as you go down that path, sometimes it does. You feel like you're so isolated, but I think there's a significant value in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it becomes surreal in this way where, you just walk the streets and you're like in this alternate. I mean, I know you feel it too. You haven't been around it in a while, but when you relocate yourself to a place where it's like, it's just like you walk around and you're like, you feel literally like you're walking between the worlds.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks. And,
well, I think that's what has initiated in me with such a study of multiple dimension realities.
Yeah.
Is because there I am walking in the world and I feel that surrealness, and then I experience as if I am walking between the worlds. And so now I'm trying to understand, well, what are these other worlds that are starting to move through me?
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I think I look towards it as an escape. And that's the other thing with expanding our consciousness. If we're in the material world and we're not very mature, our tendency is to just keep saying no, 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 or I'm staying away. I'm not going to look that way. But eventually, I think in our maturity, we look at it and we don't have a relationship to it any longer on a deeper level. And we get empowered in knowing, no, this is what I choose rather than what I don't choose any longer. And it's interesting to walk amongst people and you can hear their thoughts. You can feel it, right? So, but to bring it back to that more basic level, I think my understanding of our consciousness now is just how vast is your imagination? How readily can you see outside of the boxes? And it's like having an experience in that surreal. When you're in that surreal and you have a better understanding of there's nothing wrong with you, you're just having a very aware moment, then how vast can you imagine what's happening to you in that moment? You know, can you venture to say, wow, there's another kind of consciousness I'm experiencing. I can't explain it, but I am having it.
I think that you may have a different experience, but I think that people are starting to have that, and they don't have the emotional intelligence, the spiritual maturity, or vice versa, to understand what that is. And so people, I mean, and this is what I've noticed, is people are so ingrained in their pattern thinking and behaviors that even if they're having that experience, often sometimes I really feel like that pattern behavior and that pattern thinking kicks in, and it stops the process from continuing. I've seen that so much in people where they can't even expand enough to understand this new thing that's happening to them. It just goes straight back into playing it with this old paradigm, which stops it from happening. And I think people will eventually get there through evolution and through birthing children that have left the evolutionary scale ladder. But my experience has been, you know, you say something to somebody and their response is in such an ingrained way that you're like, but that's not what I said. That's not even close to a response to a
Right.
subject altogether. So, you know, the people who are waking up to this and realizing it and trying to shift that, I guess my question goes back to, what are you doing with yourself? What questions are you asking yourself? What type of reflection are you doing?
Yeah.
Allowing you to start repatterning that thinking, that behavior, your own spirituality. That's what I'm curious about, because I'm not, you know, unless you're in this practice all the time like we are, and with people often that are also in their practice, I don't think people have anywhere to take it. They just don't know what it is. They don't know what to do with it. And hopefully they're smart enough to seek out support. But if you don't have that.
Well, one of the things that's been going through my mind, especially with the kind of news reporting that's happened over the past couple of weeks and the kind of research and study, is I think in the past, yes, we were influenced to see how hard it was to sustain freedom, right, in a political way, civil rights. And I think we were influenced by the program religions to don't worry about that, you know, just follow this path over here, you know, the cliche of go, you know, just go do your ohms and be in meditation and everything's going to be all right. Now, we have a whole category of that misconception now, and we are recognizing that that's been a form of denial, even though there are those of us that have done that and have really gained insight, okay? So I want to kind of recall that practice for a moment in view of the kind of news that we're sharing. I've sat back and, you know, and I've come back out and I've been being and doing in the world. Yet, when I come to these places of a reality check, okay, so I'm sitting in a position, I shared this last week, that I'm accepting that the world is getting worse, okay? And I share that not from a place of despair. I'm willing to accept that, no, things are not getting better, and I'm not looking for denial, and nor am I looking for escape. However, when I ask of my own self, you know, the hard questions, okay, so what do we do now? What's the next step? It is that inner practice that I'm turning to, okay? And, I consider myself pretty aware. And so I am hearing, when are you going to stop trying to save the world? When are you going to stop going down that path thinking, if you change this little ordinance over here, you've made progress? And not to be a fatalist and not to be a non-doer, I am really coming to a place where I think we're being distracted. I think us continuing in that fashion is potential distraction, and that an exit.
Clarify what fashion?
What's a distraction?
What's a distraction?
That we still are engaging in these little baby steps of changing our civil liberties, still going up against the judiciary system, right?
So what do you say the alternate?
Well, this is where I feel our focus is of more benefit, and not in that new age way, but I think our focus is of more benefit to be really digging deep. How does one exit the material world?
Okay.
So I guess, pardon?
How do you think?
Well, it brings me back to taking as much time, quietude, and study, reflecting on self. Okay, now that's getting boo-hooed right now, but there is a value there. I'm not saying do it as an escape. I'm saying delve into that deeper part of ourself and understand that there's a conscious exit. And as we delve deeper into ourselves, we have all the data and the intel to remember our origins. Okay? So anything and everything that was true in our scriptures came from our inner self. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we're giving that inner self as much attention and devotion as we would a science or a politics, right, or a journalistic approach. Because I think we talk about inner technology, but we are not really dedicated to it yet. So what I'm understanding is I'm watching how, in order to understand what's going on in the world, it's understanding personally everything I'm having to let go of.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at what is of value. Now, I still hold the understanding of the love consciousness is important. I think still, being kind to one another, no harm, all those values and principles that any one of us with a vast vision holds. All right. The people of this planet know what we hold a shared vision of no harm. I just feel that's true. We haven't been able to change our environment to facilitate no harm.
Right.
And so turning our attention to what works, knowing there's only so much time we have left as these as this program encroaches more and more.
Are you talking about as a human race, as a planet, as an individual? And when you say this new program is encroaching, what do you mean?
Yeah, I'm speaking to the planetary population, and the fact that, for those of us that can just sit and look eye to eye and say, look, things are getting worse.
Yeah.
Right? So what are our best choices within this scenario? to thrive as much as we can right now. And we do see that on the planet. We see people who have made great efforts to create good businesses, the new paradigms, to be thinking about our food, thinking about our water.
Right.
And then this conference is coming up the end of June, TUG. We're looking at our indigenous families to hopefully remember our relationship to spirit and to the planet. Okay. And I'm not sure we need to address what's not working any longer.
That's the kind of crux of what I was trying to get you to say is,
Yeah.
Whether it's baby steps or big steps, don't
Yeah.
address that aren't working. Don't look to turn over the rock anymore. And I've been kind of speaking to that for a while, even in our beginning episodes where you were like, let's dig this out. I'm like, who gives a shit? Like needed any power at all anymore.
Uh-huh.
And let's move to what we need to be doing and what works for us and get clear with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That, it's good to be educated. And as we've discovered, it's good to disclose information so we can be discerning, build some muscle around the shock value of what we're discovering. But there comes a point where it's like, why do we keep looking at what's not working? We know what works. We know what to do. And some of that is just, going back to those, the 10 Commandments, the principles of integrity and ethics and morality of being loving. And some of it is this ancient, what we're calling I-Tech, which is that
Right.
cell in our body knows on some level through evolution the ancient ways of doing things and what is right and what is wrong. And all, if we sit in our practice, whatever that practice is for us, if we actually sit in it and get really clear, then we can start accessing our I-Tech, and we don't, Google will be obsolete because our inner tech is what's the Google system that we have.
Right.
So, yeah. We don't need to know what doesn't work anymore. We know what doesn't work. And yet we sit at dinner tables constantly talking about what doesn't work. And that's what blows me out. I'm like, I can't have these conversations anymore about right and wrong and who does this and who does that and what works and what doesn't. But I'm like, I'm going to go sit in meditation and get really strong with my I-Tech, and I'll come back to you with an answer. The real.
Yeah.
So I love that idea of even our own evolution since the beginning of our pre-tape shows, 3 months ago, whatever it was, to now we're going, we know that stuff doesn't work. We don't care about it. What does work? What are we doing? What are you doing? Us in about what it is that you're doing.
Right.
That doesn't feel obsolete anymore. That feels like it's still working for you. So.
And then I think some of the simple questions to ask, not to make a movement out of it or a big, protest, but all the little ways we can exit from the matrix.
Right.
All the little ways we are no longer energizing what doesn't work. And that's a hard call because that's the loop we're in, and it's all about survival. It comes down to survival. And even when we look at our alternative energies, we're still talking about currency. So you have to break it down and start to evaluate in your surroundings. How can you just remove a little thing and not go to that place of, oh, my little recycling isn't going to change the world. It doesn't matter. It's about your integrity and right action.
Exactly.
Stop thinking about your every little piece is going to change the world. No. Get right with the earth, and you'll get right with the people, and we get right with our decisions. And it's like, and you're not doing it for anyone else, but honoring your inner tech, your inner integrity.
And that's really, as I've witnessed this new population I'm living in too, and, it's really about a lack of faith. And I'm not talking about faith even in what we're naming it, the divine, God, Yahweh, whatever it may be. I'm talking about faith in really knowing that what you're sensing, feeling, experiencing for the first time is authentic and it's brilliant. And if you just sit and give yourself some spaciousness to really, on a cellular level, which is this quantum kind of energy, really sit with it, the answers will come, and its description will come, and its purpose will come. But we don't take time. We don't even know that that moment's happening enough to go, whoa, dude, sit this one down, and I need to chew on it and catch every flavor. No, we need to go do this, we need to go do that, and I don't have time for this. And then we wake up 10 years later, and it's been like this loop. It keeps coming back, and then your pattern behavior kiboshes it, and it keeps coming back. And so we haven't made any progress, but it's, I don't know what prompted me to say that you had but yeah, so to be able to really, and some people are already sitting and they're creating and a lot from a trend in spirituality, meditation, sitting, asana, whatever. And that's great. But now what's happening is that inner tech is kicking in and things are being, revealed and stirred up and activated. So now we're at a different level. And how do we more deeply, how do we really more deeply sit? How do we sit and digest and evolve quantum cellular level that we may not have really needed before nor experienced? And, people are like, people, and I don't want to sound judging when I say this. This is just where we've been and now where we're going. A lot of the conversations around spirituality, in the majority, I'm not saying everybody, is around, or meditation is around, I do my 15 minutes of meditation every day. It saves my life. It keeps me centered. It keeps me managing my emotions. And every once in a while, I hear about somebody having, a Kundalini experience or a connection with the divine or something ancient or something, especially with the tantric mantra meditation. But most people do a breathing type meditation, and it's good. It's a good management system.
Yes.
But then when we're out, stirring the pot, cooking dinner, get hit with this eye tech, that's when that's the next level. And
exactly
from the sitting in this other arena, now we need to sit in spaciousness, which gets us to a place of sitting quantumly, where the eye tech is already out in us, but that's what becomes revealed. And I'm wondering if people are starting to experience that. And if so, how are they utilizing it? How are they internalizing it in a way where it's conscious for them, as opposed to having this really disoriented experience while stirring the spaghetti pot?
Exactly. Like just having a rush off of the aha, or the Kundalini's now moved up another notch in your chakras. It's like we're getting kicked off our Zafu. and
he has these experiences all the time. And he just gets mad at me instead, like it's a defense, and I'll say, no, you don't, you're feeling disoriented because, I don't have time to deal with it, and I'll go on to the next thing, and it's disorienting for him, and maybe partly because we're together, and I am always in that space most of the time, always, that it's like, like his cellular level is matching up, but I think his experience is not abnormal. I think it's the normal, and it's like,
that
it's too much for me. And he'll go walk the dog.
Right. Well, because we're more inclined, we've been more influenced to think our way through those experiences. And if we talk about inner tech, this is the seat of power. And I think there's an evolutionary step that we're taking here in this understanding. It's like it's no longer, I do 15 minutes so I'm centered and calm while I do 3 hours of computer work. It's becoming our lab. And we don't recognize that this is where you meet with the council.
Yeah.
This is where you go. This is home. This is where you take all the world issues to the table. And after you do your 15 minutes and you get all calm, then it's time to ask, what do I do about the mortgage fraud that is threatening me now? How do I embrace that? How do I move through that?
Right. So example, like I think meditation at this point, we need that management system because we live in this world. We are a soul having a human experience, and our human body needs to be taken care of. But then we're a soul having a human experience. So where's the soul part? I think that's where the sitting in cellular spaciousness.
Mm-hmm.
This is really about the soul and not the human. And
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it you know, comes down to lots of things. I mean, you know, when I speak of meditation now, I don't even speak about it in a way. It's like, I need to go meditate to calm myself down. Like we're looking to purchase a new vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And we dead set on this price. And my partner said, okay, what do you think about this price with this one? I said, it's going to be a challenge. He's like, what do you want to do? I said, I think I need to go meditate on this one. I mean, and really, and you know me, like when I manifest, I'm like, I need to just go sit and I need to get really clear about and visualize this and feel this number on a cellular level. I didn't say to him, I just said go meditate. But what I mean, feel all of it on a cellular level and just send that energy through my iTech to the car dealership, you know. I'm just getting clear to see if the number's right. But,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, we can manage it on all these different levels. So you know, it's interesting because I'm not meditating a whole lot right now. I'm not doing the whole, you know, I'm not doing pranayama very much right now. And it's occurring to me that it's possibly because I am in this place where I am so tapped into my iTech
Mm-hmm.
that I don't need that. But yet the human part of me is judging that, going, you know, dude, you should really be, and you should really do. And it's because of this. And, and yet maybe that management system, you know, is great for some people and still in place. And my humanness is judging myself for not doing it, but maybe it's just like not what.
Well, we're evolving. Our soulful human cells are getting more and more present, and it's becoming more integrated. It's a way of life. It's like every moment we have the opportunity to get clear.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think, you know, regardless of what the material world is doing, it's archaic and it's got a beginning and an end. But planetarily in consciousness, I feel is progressing. And it's progressed to a point where I'm not so sure the sitting, the meditation is being more accessible right now. Learning how to get quiet before you answer a question.
You're saying you don't think, you're thinking that's obsolete, or you're thinking it's even more energized?
Yeah, I think it's, I think we are evolving enough that the need of the meditative practice is more integrated now.
Mm-hmm. Like I was saying.
And that, right, and that now sitting isn't, oh, how do you pay attention to your breath anymore? Sitting is like, this is the counsel. I'm going to go sit with counsel and find out what should I do next. While we were having this conversation, I remembered something that had come to me years ago, and I've been thinking about it a lot.
I'm not in trouble, am I?
Yeah, you're in big trouble.
So this is exciting stuff. I love trouble.
Yeah. It's like, I've been watching you, and we've got a checklist, and there are like 5 items that you have just failed.
Fuck up. Come up with more than 5, I'm sure.
I was being kind. Yeah. Okay. So here it was. I was working with a client. Oh, I think it was about 6 years ago. And she had a lot of memory about being in Atlantis. And she was absolutely terrified.
Really?
Yeah, in her memory. And she never told anyone until that moment. It came to the surface. And she was able to express how much fear she had around remembering that time that she was there when it started to really shake down. She was in a temple, and things were being destroyed. And, you know, I worked with her. And she got me to thinking, and I thought, wow, because I had a sense she knew that she was only like, maybe somewhere between 13 and 15 years of age. And so I sat for a long time after that session and really, really asked for more information about how could an individual, from what we know about Atlantis, being an advanced society technologically and supposedly spiritually, right? I was asking, how could there be that much fright of somebody who was working in a temple when such a severe crisis occurred? It was like, my mind just wanted to say, wait a minute. Did they not have that inner resource to move through this? So I searched and searched, and then I got this information, and I think it's right on. And I think it's the consideration for today.
When Blue says she searched and searched, she meant she sat and sat.
Yeah, right. I sat and sat. I went to my counsel and said, okay, look, I'm trying to figure this out. Help me with some information. And this is what I heard. That Atlantis had been going for so long as an advanced society. And so much of their needs were taken care of, right? That several generations had learned to live in an environment that had peace and had prosperity. And as a result, the generations forgot or stopped teaching the children that their origins are with Source. They stopped sharing that very significant information because they were well taken care of. And so when this destruction came, the ones who suffered the most were the children, because when they were in such confrontation, they had no understanding of where to go to find some peace and be able to alleviate that fear. And that stayed with me for a long time. And I started looking at today, and I thought, well, wait a minute now. Again, I use myself as the example. I have learned to value really going in here and really, really cultivating that there truly is a council that takes care of me. And I look around, and it's like we could say the same thing about our children today, never mind the adults and how many generations it goes back to, that there is nothing that is teaching our children, and I'm ruling out religion right now. I'm ruling out dogma. That's not what we're talking about. There is nothing that's teaching our children but the conscious adults that are raising them. And there is nothing that's nurturing and cultivating the same thing all our adult selves are looking for right now, is how do I be strengthened from within myself, this inner technology? How do I know myself as God, right? And and the only way you're going to teach it to your children is by demonstrating it. So when I talk about, okay, what do we turn our attention to? For me, I would be turning to the children and trying to understand. In fact, that's what I was thinking of when I was in Alstom with those children, is I wanted to understand, how could I nurture and cultivate, there they are in their child spirit, to keep trusting that invisible friend they're talking to, or keep trusting their very creative, out-of-the-box imagination. That to me, their creativity and their imagination is really what gives them the opportunity to feel their way through, right? So anyway, that became a big topic for me, and that's what I'm looking at right now. It's like, well, heck, our generation came out of, meditation practice, and, we've got great esoteric understandings, inner tech. But until we get it, our children they have no tools for what we're coming into, right? If they're still operating on the same tools the adults are, I mean, we should be teaching. What are we teaching these kids? We don't have a world we feel like we can promote and say, yeah, go out and get a job, get an education. We know better. So what are we giving them? What are we giving?
I'm not sure if I totally agree with all of your statement, I'm thinking. But I mean, I agree with the part about partly with the only people that are teaching our children to be conscious are the conscious parents or people.
Right.
I have to throw in there, though, if we look at, the model of the microcosm to the exosystem and we go, I think there's people in our school systems and I think there's people in the world that are also part of the tribe that are influencing our children. However, the flip side of that is that I think there's a lot of conscious or growing into consciousness parents, people that are not raising their children that way because their consciousness is in such a seedling stage. And I experience too, it's like, oh, I got to get to yoga class or I got to meditate. And if I don't meditate, I'm going to go off on my family or,
right.
Having a really deep spiritual daily practice, even going to, and yet your children aren't doing it. They're going to soccer practice and they're going to piano lessons and they're running to school and they're spending 3 hours doing homework. And so the flip side is I agree with you, but on the other side, there's many that I think are really deeply living consciously and they're not necessarily not passing any of it on, but they're not really practicing the depth of it on or passing on the depth of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I speak that language like, make stronger choices and that's not a kind thing to do and take a moment and think about that and do some breathing, getting out of control, but to really, to really pass it on in ways where I'm going to do a 2-hour meditation practice, do it with me,
Right.
You speak in these places. So.
Well, and it just seems to me, it seems to me the children need to be as updated on how the planet is diminishing so that they can make really good choices. And I would think that makes perfect sense to go towards sustainability. It might be more helpful for the children to understand how to grow food and how to purify water and keep them in the technologies that are going to enhance their survival. But it's not the day and age you want to teach a kid how to be a banker. And it's right.
Education, I can say that that's changing. And, we've got the design formula for education, which is taken from engineers and creative thinkers and it's been put into the classroom about brainstorming. We also have the 21st century learning and students, which is all about this idea of expansive creative thinking and training and teaching children to be resourceful and move towards careers that we're going to start having and giving them applied knowledge. So it's happening. However, we're also stuck in this paradigm in the schools where it's like, no, you need to learn this, this, and that. So I think it's getting there. And this is part of the trainings that I teach people to do is all based on the undercurrent of these models of, brainstorming, creative thinking, original out of the box thinking, 21st century leadership skills. So it is happening. And, but Lily's in a camp right now, a day camp for the next 2 weeks. And it's in a nature center and it's all about adaptation, evolution, survival, it's just great. And she wakes up in the morning and it's 9 to 5. So it's even longer than school. Starts a little later. She gets up and she has a good breakfast and she organizes her backpack and she's ready to go and she's excited and she comes home happy and tired and she goes to bed without a fuss. It is like completely different than school. And yet the things that she's learning, they hike out to have lunch and they bring their lunch with them. They go, they learn about all these different things and you get to pick your, different activities for the week, salamander hunting or.
Okay. And what you're talking about too, Becca.
Foraging. So I'm like, school should be like. And then, of course, essentials. You're 3 hours in there in terms of how many salamanders, count the salamanders. But there's different sense about her and a different experience of the world and learning that happens in this way. So, yeah,
I asked myself, too, when I was younger, I was going away to summer camp. And the question I would ask now is, why does summer camp end?
Right. But we should
We're, right? It's like,
but it's not there yet.
yeah, but there's where look at the child, absolutely excited, learning survival skills out in nature. And it's like, and why does that stop?
Talk about, earthing and grounding, just the calmness in her for being outside and not under the light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's fascinating. And I've known this forever, but this is my daughter's first experience being in a curricular type setting, learning something. Usually our summers are off and she's just having fun, but this is the first time she's been outside in a curriculum focused environment. And it's like night and day for her. So yeah. I think, we're teaching our children, we're making those changes, but again, we're so tied into bureaucracy that we wouldn't have any schools at all if we don't follow the rules. So it is changing, but I agree with your statement. I feel like, yes, there's conscious parents raising conscious children. There's also conscious parents that are just at the point where they're gaining consciousness and in their practice that aren't necessarily passing on the depth of it. And I also feel like sometimes with some parents, I feel like, thank God they have school 8 hours a day, and thank goodness they've got their teachers, because it's the only positive influence in their life.
Right.
And home, so.
Well, on another note, the last week I met a mother who just gave birth and didn't register her baby. And I was over the top thrilled. She knew why she wasn't signing that birth certificate. And then the next step both her and a partner were up against was vaccinations. They were doing their research. And it was so just thrilling to see that consciousness. So we'll see how far that goes. I don't know how long you can go to that. The road has many obstacles. But nonetheless, that was progress. That was absolute progress. So what, as I sit here and I go, okay, well, this is all fine and good, but life is the way it is. And it comes back to, what's happening on a day-to-day basis and what are the tools that can assist. And maybe we could clarify some of those, the questions that we started to ask earlier is like, how do you assess that if you hear a truth inside yourself, it's a truth. How do you see that truth around you? Or how are you living it? And that's what's been the hardest for me on this journey is when, like you said, you go out into the world and it's like, wow, that's fallen out and this is fallen out. Then the world seems surreal and you don't want to judge it because that doesn't serve you. But it's hard to live our truths. Let's put it that way. It's hard to live our truths in relation to where the world is. And of course, it's been made difficult for us to even live our truth, which was the intention. But like, for instance, you've got a child in camp. Well, heck, we should have adult camp, right? I mean, we might call it something else. But
a retreat.
And we know in our hearts, you just look at your child, you see how radiant they are. That would be an environment you'd want to foster for them. But we can't because we have that juxtaposition. And yet, I think that's where we have to have so much forgiveness for ourselves when we can't live our truth. And we have to accept our limitation. And then we have to go above that. We have to accept it and we have to feel okay about some of the things we participate in because that is where it is. And it's just not an easy path to all of a sudden go, okay, I'm not going to do that and this and that. All of us have tried a utopia, and utopia it's not easy. Or even just going off and starting a farm. It's just not easy. So I would think that we're always in this forgiving state, right? Like, for instance, let's say it's not your ideal school for your kid, but it's the best school, right? And you have to be forgiving and accepting this is the best I can do. And I think that's when you spiral back to what enhances our center and our confidence on this planet, it always comes back to self-love. And it's not the self-love is like this example I'm sharing. It's like when you know it's the best you can do, you can love yourself fully for knowing it's the best. It may not be your ideal, but it's the best you can do. And I like to think about people on the planet in that way, that everyone's doing the best that they can. And again, what more important thing is there on this planet but then turning to each other and sharing our love and gentleness and care for each other, right? So I think that's important in everything we're taking on. I think it's just evolution that we want to find out who we are. I think the moment, for whatever reason, when someone wakes up, I can't imagine anybody not always considering that, who am I? Where did I come from? What's this all about? I mean, we might not come back to it for 2 weeks at a time, but I can't imagine there's anyone on this planet that doesn't ask those kind of questions.
Yeah, I think everybody asks those questions at some point. It's whether you have the capacity to sit in spaciousness and find the answers, which is, I think, and I don't know how many people that actually do that.
Yeah. And yeah, and there too, it's like we have to accept, like we used to be angry. Like I know there's still anger and despair. Like, we have this whole thing about people wake up. I was part of that. And I've kind of changed my tone about that. It's like, wait a minute, hold up.
Weeks ago you were like that.
Right. Yeah, it was only 3 weeks ago. But I'm coming to this place like everyone's doing the best that they can. And it's not our business or our responsibility to change anyone. And I trust that I was asleep at some point. Who knows how many thousands of years I've come back here, that I was asleep. And it's like, oh, this lifetime I happen to have this awareness. But it's like, if we're coming here and we're exploring and we're learning, and we know that even those that were in power are our partners in contrast, and they've been a significant part of us learning, right? So they're all in the same boat as well. It's like, who am I to say somebody's asleep?
Well, I mean, I think that we can recognize people that are asleep, but the point is to not judge and then not participate if we don't want to. Why participate in getting yourself all angsty or forcing yourself on them and go, wake up, wake up. It's just like you and I are in places and you'll get there. And, I can either sit in this with you, but to be conscious enough to go, or I choose not to.
Uh-huh.
Before it was like the whole saving the world thing or judging someone to the place where you're like, no, you must change. I'm going to help you.
Right. And it's like, and I don't necessarily think that someone has to have a vast consciousness to just understand right and wrong in the world. To just have a sense of, oh, of course I'm not going to do any harm. I don't think that it's a vast amount. That's just something that we nurture in each other. Oh, it's saying the internet is unstable, so we'll see what happens.
Buffering a little bit, but you're okay now.
Okay. If anything, if anything happens, I go down. I may try to just put my iPhone on and see if I can connect that way.
What were you just saying?
I was saying about that I don't think it takes a vast amount of consciousness to know right from wrong. And
Doesn't, but we hope that people get to that place at least.
yeah, right. I think that that's something that we can cultivate in our children and each other is, just not doing harm. But I don't think you have to have this supernatural spiritual understanding, of infinity to understand how not harming someone serves you.
Yeah. You'd think.
You would think, yeah. Because, I mean, let's, when we teach children, right?
What's going on over there?
Huh?
What's going on over there?
What?
What are you doing?
Oh, what, me down here? I'm just messing around with my leg. But I'm thinking about when I've worked with children, it's a lot in the resonance of our voice and ourself when we present the idea of, be easy on the rabbit's ears, for instance. You don't want to pull their ears, it hurts. And they understand and learn gentleness, but, they're not sitting there having this whole mental conversation about the spiritual consciousness of that. And so, and I think that is something I feel rises up in people in general. I think humanity, like we've always spoken about, if you're having a crisis, the most beautiful part of people come out. It's so there to try to help each other and take someone out of pain, or suffering. So then the greater consciousness is more about, I think that's just when you get mature and you start asking questions like, although the 2-year-olds will do that, right? Have you ever you've had that round? It's like, why? I had an interesting experience happen in Austin. I remember Dee, it was one of Dee's, her youngest, and we had a really dear dog died, and there were lots of children that were pretty close to him. Everyone was. We had to bury her. And after she was buried, her youngest, every day, would speak to the dog dying. What happened? And would come to the grave. Every day he would ask me questions about death. And finally, I think this had gone on for a week or 2 weeks. And one day Dee just said to me, she said, he's testing you. But the thing is that there he was, he's all of 4 years of age, and he was asking really important questions. And I would just answer him as best I could, but he was after wanting to understand something. And I don't think my answers were necessarily, he had a relationship to this dog having passed over, and he knew this dog, and he saw us dig the hole, and he saw everyone around it. But there he was. I mean, he was clearly asking questions from a consciousness.
Okay, so again, we must be at that almost hour mark because you're spinning.
I went off on the topics I really like to talk about.
So you're like super contradictory woman today, because you're saying that children aren't conscious, and now you're saying they are, and I kind of want to.
Oh, I was trying to distinguish. The conversation went this way because I was distinguishing between, we can have a certain compassion and understanding of no harm and not necessarily have the broader consciousness. But I switched to the other side because I was thinking about the 2-year-olds, the why. And then the story came to me and I thought, well, but then here was a young one that was definitely insinuating a consciousness, a bigger consciousness than a 4 years of age.
Jumping, you're spinning around all this stuff. And I think the through line is that children are more conscious. However, developmentally,
Mm.
you know, being tapped into your ancient self, having your pineal open, being in touch with the divine is a completely separate issue from having a vocabulary and a management system for this human body.
Right.
So this is the way I look at it. And if you look at developmental psychology, they sort of speak to this, which is this idea that we are born wide open. We are more soul than human, which is where those questions come from. But however, we become more human over time. We acclimate to being human, which is that our soul starts to go more deeply inward, and the human part gains the management system. So that's why a 2-year-old has a tantrum and hopefully a 25-year-old does not, because the human part has become the greater piece of the pie, and they've increased their management skills and gained those things. So that's why we get 2-year-olds that ask these profound questions, and then 2 minutes later, when their milk is in the wrong sippy cup, they fall on the floor having a fit.
Right.
So I think what we're saying is that, you know, we don't need a vast capacity for spirituality and
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of magic in order
Right.
to teach right and wrong. That's a concrete thing, teaching right and wrong. I think we're talking about two separate issues. So no,
Mm-hmm.
however, when we speak of development and we speak of a child being more soul than human, or the summary is that a child is more soul than human and an adult is more human than soul, that's when we struggle with, you know, we're great at behaving ourselves and acting appropriately in the grocery store and not saying that thing at a dinner party that's going to wind up, you know, causing someone to punch you in the face. So we've built those management systems. But the thing that winds up happening, you know, the deficit is that our soul no longer functions at maximum capacity.
Mm.
And then we start to try and reintegrate that. And then we try and teach that to our children, which is our children should be teaching it to us because they're more soul than human.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So no, we don't need a vast expanse of spiritual knowledge to be able to teach right and wrong. That's concrete. It's something that needs to get done. We teach it in increments over time when our brain, our human brain, becomes more complex. However, what I think conscious people need to recognize is that we need to start with the very, very young because they're more soul than human. So it
Mm-hmm.
takes less work to stay soul than human. So if, you know, instead of it doing like soul, when you're born, you're here, soul, and here's human, and it starts to go like this. And by the time you're an adult, the soul is at such an incrementally lower level, and your management, your human management system is functioning really high. If we actually take our deep practices of consciousness and spirituality at that stage where we're this much soul and this much human, that
Mm-hmm.
does this over time because we've given children the, you know, the staying power to simultaneously grow their human parts and maintain their soul parts,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we don't do that, you know, through schools, through our own consciousness practices. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I don't sit down with my daughter in seated meditation, and I should. I mean, before bed, it's like, yes, you can watch TV for half an hour. It's like, dude, no way. Get on this mat with me. You know, that's what I should be doing. I'm going to meditate now. You can watch a show. And it's like, that's just fucking stupid. Like, I should be asking her to do 5 minutes with me, you know? So guilty, but I do believe that what we're striving to do is create, instead of a, you know, instead of this perception of a human experiencing, having a soulful experience, we need to maintain this level that we're born with, soul, human, and rise them both. You know, we want to stay 80% more soul, and we want to stay about 20% human, but they both have to grow incrementally. So we're at 500% human and 800% soul by the time we mature into our emotional and spiritual maturity, because emotional is human. Spiritual is our ITAC, you know, so
Mm-hmm.
I really think that to break it down in this way where we're like talking all over these things and having these experiences, it really comes down to this nugget of how do we maintain the ratio of soul to human throughout the lifespan in a way where, you know, because emotional maturity is a human Spiritual maturity is a soulful experience. So we're speaking of two different things. And I think just in our conversation, I was able to kind of pull them apart and go, no, wait a minute. These are two different things happening in the same petri dish, in the same test tube. So yeah, and the fault, and we've been speaking to this. It's like we grow to be an adult, and then we have these really disorienting spiritual experience, soulful experiences, and we get overwhelmed, and we go to our patterned human thinking, behaviors, and feelings, and then we stop the soul experience from happening. So great, we'll take care of ourselves. We're human, we're adults, we'll figure it out, we'll get there again. But how do we not have that happen in the next generations, where we're then having orienting, angered, frustrating, scary experiences in our early adulthood through midlife, where it's like, how can again, soul, body, how can we maintain that over the lifespan? That's the question that we're really looking at, is what practices do you have in place, or what practices do you fantasize about our world doing that will keep that ratio where it's supposed to be, instead of soul dropping and human functioning, rising? Like, how can we build those together and keep the soul really as the umbrella for this human experience? What are we doing? What's obsolete? Where do we need to go deeper? What do you fantasize about the next generation growing up and being and doing?
Right. And the only our best teacher is each of us individually, how we are being.
Yeah.
Because we've learned that if you start to go into the material world and you start to create yet again, another curriculum, another dogma, we're back to what we're throwing out.
Right.
It really has to be within our own activity, the way we communicate, the choices that we make. That's the only way we're going to change it.
That's the thing too, and as we've been going through this broadcast,
Mm-hmm.
an observer, and I've been noticing that I am becoming increasingly, you girl, you are breaking the rules. I'm going to tell, but I'm on your ears, so nobody can hear me scream.
Nobody's in the courtyard.
Oh, screw it, whatever. You're such a rebel.
Oh, yeah.
Being my own observer in this, and really noticing, for whatever reason, the content of what we're speaking to today. Are you listening?
I am.
Okay. The content of what we're speaking to today, my observer self has noticed that I'm becoming hypercritical. Like, every time you bring something up, situation, thought, idea about a practice, where we think we want to be, I'm getting hypercritical of myself as a mother and a human. Is like, man, you suck as a human. As a spiritualist, good. But as a human, you don't have this human thing down at all. And, this idea of being conscious, raising conscious children, I am just as guilty, as I said a moment ago, of sticking my daughter in front of the TV. So I can fucking go meditate, like, oh my God.
Right.
And I'm not so much there anymore, although I do have my moments. But, this idea of being like, like being really nice to the grocery clerk, and being like, in love and light, namaste. And then coming home and be like, what the fuck? You didn't do your homework. So it's like, it's such a struggle to be spiritual in this human body. And we can be so conscious when we're in the yoga studio, we can, and you walk outside and your partner picks you up, or you see someone getting picked up by their partner and they're like, how's class? Good. Did you make dinner?
Yeah.
Clean the house, and it's like, so, and I'm speaking of myself too, which is why I was observing the hypercritic, and, I constantly have to work on managing my human vessel, in this daily world, and my spiritual, my soulful vessel definitely helps that. But in some ways they're really different things. And, and I know where I need to do the work. And I know when I get too tired, too hungry, too overwhelmed, that, this like half a sentence person comes out, yes, do it, no, go here, go there, and people are like, you mad? I'm like, no, I don't have any more to give than half a sentence, just like, you know. And so how do we integrate the soul and the human in a way where they abide in the same vessel in this way where they can help each other? The human part can help ground the soul, and the soulful part can help us. Not only in a moment of reprieve, you should be kind and don't tug on the rabbit's ears. But in a moment of crisis, that you're still speaking from the soul vessel, which is like, okay, even though that person just went off on you, my dear, it's okay. Practice love and forgiveness. So it's really creating this hologram of no matter what. And, you know, we can speak to this idea of the ego. So like the human experience is the egoic experience. And we need that because we're on this planet, you know, and we've spoken to this idea of, you know, most people say, smash the ego, live in the divine. You know, our ego needs to be smashed, and we need to disintegrate the ego through our spiritual practices. And, you know, Ravi Singh and Anna Brett were the ones that kind of really verbally brought out and clarified for me. My belief was just like, I always kind of thought there was some discrepancy in that statement, you know, because I was like, but our egos serve a lot of purposes: fight or flight, discernment, what we need and what we don't need. Anger is a really normal emotion. It's what we've been trained to do with it. That our soul body has done this and our human body's done this. But if we can get to a place where we grow them like this and the soul stays incrementally above that, you know, as a greater ratio, you know, then the ego is really in a divine place all the time. And so one thing they said is, you know, the purpose of the divine is not to smash and eradicate the ego. Purpose of the divine is to raise the ego up to meet the divine so that both are functioning together. And that's when I had this, thank you, Ravi Singh and Anna Brett, because it's totally what I believe, and I've never been able to codify that. And it speaks to this idea of, you know, we're born with more soul than humanity, or humanness, flawed and wonderful. But if we raise them together, and then our soul gets to a place where we can continue to let the ego, let the human experience be informed by the soul experience, as opposed to when we grow up, it does this, and our human experience is just surviving. No information and no sisterhood or no brotherhood or no soul, you know, soul human ego connection. And so I see talking as a human.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, I agree with you about the ego. I think I have to clarify though that my perspective would not be that there's the soul and the human. I think I like to think of it as, okay, the full out consciousness is present all the time.
Yeah.
But the human, in its engagement with the material world, is the veil. And it's like that's the shroud, the cloud, or the, right, that's over. I feel that, you know, that full out, what you're calling soul, and I'm re-examining the use of that word, but what you're identifying as soul, that's a full out presence. It's with us all the time. It's part of the quanta, all right?
But is that the power entrained that its presence isn't audible like it should be. It's with us all the time.
Exactly. Like we witness that more in children where they're not socialized yet to that extent, and the veil isn't that thick, and they're in their innocence. They're still close to coming into the world. And that's why it's like, I mean, infants are just the most magical experiences, to be around an infant that is so innocent. And you can feel their essence. You can feel their presence. And then slowly but surely, the integration into the material world all the layers start to come on. There's the social one. There's the cultural one. And the next thing you know, here you are. And you're trying to always go back home. You're always trying to go back to that innocence, that child self that was so free. Anyway, that's the way I perceive it. But I understand, yes, we do experience that discrepancy. And that's why we're the ones that present the models, just like there are cultures, especially the indigenous people that are on the planet that have such a clean relationship to what they need to exist. And they still maintain, most of them, a reverence and respect for the earth, because she's the one who provides the food and provides the materials that give them shelter. There's a real communion happening there. And after eons of a culture evolving like that, it's like you don't even have to explain to the child you don't pull on the rabbit's ears. It's already an understanding. And so that's why, as we change, sure, generations are going to change. I mean, we're definitely raising children with a lot more consciousness, I feel. Those of us who are conscious, okay, or aware as we are definitely sharing that awareness with our children. But I think the greater picture is that we can't deliver them to the world that we thought we had. So now it's like, okay, we want you to be honest, and we want you to be as present and as innocent as you possibly can. But now you've got the world to participate in. And I think that's something parents have to consider all the time. It's like you might raise them in this very sheltered, beautiful environment, right, and bring real beauty forward. But then it's like, okay, now how do I teach you to be in that? And sometimes that's when, we might.
As someone who's had a really strong practice and has been, off the human map for a lot of years, I was so sucking at being human. Now I just sort of suck at being human. Oh, I mean, some people are just born maybe and can do that. But yeah, where do we get to that place where we are living so consciously,
Mm-hmm.
or having the veils of what you're calling humanness,
Mm-hmm.
So we can be more in the divine or the soulful, like where we just automatically teach our children without effort or conscious, consciousness, like we're not aware that we're going, okay, now I'm going to model for my child this thing.
Yeah.
Because you and I opened the show. Well, you opened the show, not directly speaking to it, but our theme when we talked prior to going on air was about, let's talk about emotional maturation and spiritual maturation. And at the time we were speaking of it, we were kind of thinking in terms of them, we just threw it out there because of themes we're seeing happening politically,
Mm-hmm.
news media and our personal lives. And we're like, yeah, cool, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I never, when we start these shows, I have this one idea of what I think it's going to be. It's like, yeah, it's having coping skills and, and doing your meditation practice. And I wonder what people are actually doing to gain emotional and spiritual maturity. And we kind of lumped it in together.
Uh-huh.
Really fascinating where, for me personally, I can't speak for you, where my ideas coming in of what I believed or what I have experienced shift so much during our conversation. And then yeah. You spin out around 48 minutes into the show, and I'm like, what the fuck is she talking about? What? Spinning? I don't even understand why that makes any sense. And then, bring it back down, and then we have these aha moments where it's like, but that, this is what we're really talking about. Like, this is what we were supposed to discover. We have been grappling with our eye tech for 49 and a half minutes. 57 now it's cleaned itself up. It's kind of what we thought we were actually going to come up with in the end is not.
It's the process. The process is so important. Yeah. I feel like often you and I have conversations, but those who are with us on the show, they're getting to kind of witness the process because we're thinking out loud.
Yeah,
we're thinking out loud.
Then when you have this moment of this essential question, oh my God, what is my spiritual maturity? What is my emotional maturity? And then you go through this thing where you go about your day, stirring your pot of spaghetti, taking your kids to school, whatever. And you question is mulling, and they're like, we mull, like, well, what is it? And, and then you get into like having these reflective experiences like you and the dog and the child and the berry, those, like, and you go, okay, well, what about this experience? Does that mimic that? And what about that? And then you get to the point where you're like, oh my God, I'm sick of thinking about this and I'm so confused and it doesn't feel good. And then you go, and that's the digging deeper. And then you go, on this show, it's really no different than your individual process of
Absolutely.
igniting, getting lit, reflecting, observing, clarifying, then discerning what really the information should be, getting disoriented, feeling uncomfortable, thinking it's all a piece of shit, it's all bullshit, and then it all falls away because you give up. And that's when the eye-tech, everything human, local eye-tech goes, no, dude, shut up for a minute. You finally shut up long enough for me to say, your eye-tech finally goes, oh, you're fucking quiet now. Good. Shut up for a moment. Here. This is, it's just interesting how, it's the micro macro of just how things really aren't that different in the big picture or the tiny picture.
Exactly. And then that's our barometer too, because if we've got the micro macro going on, it's our barometer. The extent to which we understand ourselves is only going to be the extent to which we understand our environment and world around us. It's just bigger out there.
And then I love the thing where, you point something out to someone you're in this human dynamic with, and they go, you're the only one I have this issue with. And I'm like, pointing it out, like you're that unaware, or that you've got so much noise going on, veiling really what the essentials are, and you're dealing with other veil people that you don't even know there's reaction happening, and that you're putting this out like, it's not me. It's that you're just completely unaware, and that's blissful in some ways, but it doesn't give us progress to create consciousness. It doesn't give us, and then us, the people that are out there going, this only happens with you. I'm like, no, it happens with everybody. You just aren't aware of it. And then they look around and then they're the ones that complain about how we're raising our children, and why isn't this child doing this? And look at our school system. I'm like, look at yourself. How can you be complaining about the consciousness of our children when you are not willing to step into a deeper place in yourself? That's the energy. If everybody were to step into a more spacious, energetic, it would shift things. It's the idea of being psychoactive. It's like if everybody energy, just the awareness alone shifts everything else. And, it's like if we got everybody in the football stadium before they watch the Bears game, that intense energy. I mean, there's so much energy around a sporting event. If we got everybody in, Soldiers Field to just take even 1 minute to put that much energy into healing cancer, guess what? We'd heal cancer. But we don't do that. We do it for football. Yeah. And I'm not doing it for football. Just take 1 minute before you get out there and do it for healing cancer. We'll pick a theme each week. But
see, those are the things we do know. We do know the effects of those things, and there have been experiments, right? We do know that works. I think, we come back to that same issue of we're still trying to organize and fix the world, change the world, and we're up against such a big control system that's what I'm beginning to go, well, what if we were to experiment with that intentional space and don't think about tomorrow, think about in this moment, how do we get stronger in accepting the reality that we're in? Well, never mind. Yeah. It's like, never mind thinking, oh, we're going to change the world. Just go, how do we become stronger in knowing who we are?
Right. And that's why I always say to my mother, kind of to piss her off because it's fun, but I also really mean it, is the whole thing about like, well, pray, don't vote. And she goes, who snatched my child? This isn't my child. But I believe that. Like, I think that if we get really clean and clear and build our eye-tech in ourselves, the rest will just solve. The rest will quantumly catch on and we'll get there. But, again, so like, do we want to keep overturning the stones of what doesn't work? It's like, I just don't. There was a time that was really important. And now I like, no, just get really right in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be so powerful. But
Yeah.
that's also complete distracted work.
Mm-hmm.
It's the onus is on us and all of the stuff we have to get clear on. It's much easier to point a finger or go fundraise or, get on platform about something else and then you come home and yell at your kid or like get frustrated or, but it's like, really, let's just, and I'm not saying don't donate money or be down for cause. People need help. That's not what I'm saying. But I think if we get more energy instead of uncovering what doesn't work, getting clean with what really works in ourselves, that's where that's where source is. That's where power is. That's really, really powerful.
I just got that unstable internet thing. Okay, looks good. Still good.
I mean, I don't know the world, but so there you have it. Okay. Now what?
So we're doing the best that we can. And that's important. And I think it's it's still very much of value to me to understand what's going on the planet, which is why I can still appreciate the news that's being brought forward. I think it's still part of how we're growing. Not that it
seconds, because 2 hours without getting to the loo makes me crazy. So finish that sentence and I'll be back.
Oh, okay. So what I was saying is that it's still of value to me to understand what's happening, via our alternative news, to get a barometer on the planet and to just understand each day what is it we want to be present to. And how are we serving? How are we contributing? And I don't think at this point in our lives, serving is a mental process. I think it's really understanding, how do I find that expansiveness and connect with everyone on this planet and share that understanding that we are affecting each other. So where does that bring us? It's bring us back to the here and now. And I find that even in my earlier meditations, always when you go to just get quiet, the mind is still so going. It's just like chattering away. And it takes a few moments and focus to when that falls away. And there really is a greater council sitting in here. And I think I shared a couple of weeks ago that, with all the understanding about now we have to be watchful of the astrals and you've got to be really clear what you're opening yourself up to, who are you calling in, and, all these gods and, everything that has been downloaded into us. Now we having to be so discerning of our energetic self. And so I had shared that now I'm doing a self-correction. And if I feel a need to sit and go, okay, I need to talk to someone, call on something, I'm identifying every energetic aspect is an aspect of me. So if I have a need to communicate with an aspect of myself that perhaps lives in another galaxy, I embrace that that's my aspect. And so I'm starting to be very watchful of don't call on any energetics or beings that are not of yourself. And so my imagination is expanding to knowing if I want to know about the population on Venus, then I'm going to identify that there's an aspect of me that knows that experience or can maybe remotely go visit. And then I call together that council in myself. So, and that's part of that internal creation too. I'm just doing everything possible to cultivate all the conversations and communication are within myself. I think you've heard me speak to that before, Becca, how I'm starting to identify all the aspects are me. And so when I say, you know, go to your counsel, now I feel more confident that when I call in the counsel of myself, I can talk freely. I can say my ideas. I can explore because I know it's all me. I know I'm not just, you know, carelessly communicating with some entity or being that I haven't even been introduced to or made a contract with. So that's how I'm keeping myself safe, so to speak.
In that shift in you from calling in things in your sitting to just being in all of your inner diversity and all of your iTech and not calling.
Well, you know, when we're reminded so often in our inner tech, we hear about this a lot. You're the co-creator. You're the co-creator, right? And I know that a lot of us are still up here about that. It's like, what's this co-creator, you know? But the way I'm starting to embrace it now is our imagination is where we get the inspiration, the visualization of how to create our reality. And so if I want to feel expansiveness, then I use my imagination. I just acknowledge I am in expansiveness. And I think it's that simple. And I'm finding that now, if we're the co-creators, I think it is that simple. Like, for instance, I'm wanting to understand transfiguration, moving from this soul suit into the next one, say via death, via physical death. And I'm finding that I can go to my counsel and say, okay, I want this information. I want to be guided and prompted to understand that. And what I'm starting to recognize is if I have a sensation, I'm allowing myself to believe, oh, there's a pocket of knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay? I'm beginning to acknowledge, okay, I don't understand multiple dimension, but then I'm going to be the one who creates the way I'm going to understand it. So as soon as I acknowledge, I feel this, and okay, there's a pocket of consciousness of myself. Now I have a real, genuine sensation of that. So it's like no one out there is going to give it to us. You know, we get ideas. And so that's where I'm working right now. It's like I'm going, wow, my every thought, I'm accepting it's invisible. I'm accepting that it's subtle. But my every thought is creating every reality. If I think there's multiple dimensions and I've decided I'm going to work with 7 of them, I visualize 7 pockets of consciousness, and then I start to communicate with each of them. And sure enough, there's some kind of life spark that is shown to me. So the inner world, and if you think about it, the material reality has kept us fully engaged out there. So fully engaged. I mean, we even to the point where, you know, we thought our spirituality was out there. And now I can understand why, because there's so much here. And I thought about that, you know, like all the information about harvesting our souls and what have you. And in my basic self, there is no way the essence of my consciousness can be harvested. So I've started to understand they've harvested the soul suit. They got our soul suit to be distracted from the part of us that can't be touched. There is a genuine essence, spirit, whatever you want to call it, inside of us that is part of the quanta, right? It's untouchable. But if you go through death with this mental, material idea of yourself, well, then they got you. You're going to go through death visualizing what they brainwashed you to visualize, programmed to visualize. But if you really get clear of that material reality and stay in this embrace of your quanta, they can't touch us. I really, really know that inside of me. Can't touch you. Safe.
First vehicle I heard.
It's got a big, big muffle going on. So again, if anyone's out there who wants to call in, I know I haven't announced that throughout the show, but that's always an invitation from beginning to end. And we wanted to share too, I'm just going to say it, I know we have a little more time to go, but beginning July 1st, Get Lit is going to change to Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Central Time.
American Central Time.
America Central Time. I don't even think Central, oh yeah, it does exist in the other countries, doesn't it? No, maybe.
And
Yeah.
next will not be here, so I just want to remind everybody that it's one of my weeks where I'll be.
Right. And I'll have a guest, Tamara Jonason will be back on the show next week. We'll co-host, and we'll still be here on Thursday next week. So it'll be the following week that we'll be on our new schedule. And and again, if anyone has communications or wants to make comments, to go to our Get Lit page in Facebook. And please put your comments there, because that's where Becca and I both get them, is through that. Then we have our, one of these days I'm going to write your name down and have a dear listener. She's consistent. The show no sooner ends and boom, she's got a comment in there. And I apologize again. I should know your name. You know, when in Facebook, I don't take in the names, because sometimes it's not even the people. You know, sometimes it's not their name.
Well, we see
They have some.
look at faces more on Facebook.
Yeah, yeah. So, and again, anyone who's enjoying the show, we still really, really would love to invite any kind of pledging and contributions to CCN. And we welcome that at effiemarket.com. And even like I've said before, if you've gotten something out of this conversation, you know, contributing $5 a show is really awesome. And one of the things that we have at Effie Market is that once you do a pledge, you can have, and you can do this each show. You can go to effiemarket.com and you can download this show. It'll probably be up in about 2 or 3 days, and get it in high definition. And then otherwise I'll come back and I post the one that goes up on YouTube. So do you have any thoughts on your little stroll?
No, I wasn't really strolling. I was busy. But I do say that, you know, getting into the later months of summer and closer to fall, I will be able to be more engaged in the Facebook page and responding. And it's just right now with the huge transition I was in and then traveling on and off for the next 7 weeks for work, for the consulting I do, it's going to leave me on the back end of this. But again, you know, we're all taking part in contributing to the network in order to keep it going. You know, remember that this is like a public television format where we don't have advertisers and we don't have investors in a way, because we want to be able to do what we need to do and say what we need to say without having someone tell us to do it a certain way. So it's really important that when you're viewing things on CCN that you have the mindset that this is a public television network, and that the only way to keep it running is to do pledge drives. And in essence, we're doing an ongoing pledge drive and asking you to participate as we are participating to keep the network going, to the autonomy and freedom to speak to those things that we normally can't speak to if advertisers were involved and investors were involved. So keep that in mind as you're watching.
Right.
but you can start, the buy-in is nominal, as we said, $5 to $10 a month, but you can go as high as you want to go because it's obviously a pledge that you're giving.
Mm-hmm.
That I will continue to, as I settle in and reconfigure my consulting work, I'll be more available. And I know that Blue has been more of the management system that we have in place, and thank goodness for that. But things will settle down for me, and I will be more available. And at that point, even before that point, I would really love to see some more interaction, because I know that we have a lot of viewers and people are digesting it and taking it in, and it would be really wonderfully brave of you to call in or write in
Mm-hmm.
and take the lead with us, because this isn't our baby. This is just something we're giving to you. So.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And also, if anyone would like to come on as a guest sometime, and feels that, they have information that they would like to share on this platform, by all means, contact us, and we can facilitate having you come on the show and bring us in, bring some of your new, your ideas, your presentations. So you're always welcome to do that. And
Private message us through, you can send us a message on GetLit if you don't want it to be a public.
mm-hmm.
Or if you're really limited tech-wise, you can contact us through CCN, and they'll forward a message to us. And our phone number, our websites are listed. So there's ways to get in touch with us if you don't want it to be like a huge announcement.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Potential of being a guest.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I noticed too, I came here with a full battery and I'm down to about a quarter left. Whoops. Ooh, did you hear that?
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button quick enough. All right, well then I feel like that's a good closure. And again, we will be back. Actually, Rebecca won't be here next week. I'll be here next Thursday, 11 a.m. Central Time, with Tamara Jonason. And we will look forward to any comments and any communications with you. So appreciate you.
Following week, I'll be back, but we'll be on at Wednesday.
On July 1st.
July 1st, Wednesday at 3 o'clock U.S. Central Time, which is prime time in Europe. So that'll be interesting for our European viewers.
Right.
And thank you for being a audience to our clarity and our subtle discovery. And I will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, and I will miss you in the meantime. Have a wonderful week.
Yeah. So much love. Thank you.